Oh, back to the cows. Is there something you want to say, Bonnie?
Well, about cows?
No, because we lost you. You can say anything you want about cows. But...
I just wanted to do an introduction. I just wanted to say that we are online hosting from Winnipeg, located on the original lands and waters of Anishinaabe, Inuiaq, Anishinaabe, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation. My name is Bonnie Taylor, and as Vice President and Chair of this show, I welcome you to the 89th Juror Lecture of the 89th edition of our OJCE, our Open Juried Competition and Exhibition. MSA's hosted this each year since 1926, give or take a few off years. And the show is a highlight of the art season for MSA members because it offers members an opportunity to help organize a show that's open to all Manitoba artists at any part of their career, or all Manitobans, as a matter of fact, to exhibit their best work in the company of their peers. And one of the objectives of this, of course, is to fast track any artists that are sleeping out there in the corners and decide that they want to exhibit. We want to celebrate outstanding Manitoba and art. So this year we're providing jurying for 54 artists submitting 133 works. And I would just like to say thank you to all our members for the support. I would also like to extend a thank you to our sponsors, to the sponsors of the show and to the sponsors of the awards. The sponsors and the award supporters are listed on the website. We have the awards will be announced on the 28th when the shortlist is announced. And finally, I'd like to thank our jurors who have agreed to the recording of the event this evening. And fortunately for us, it will be edited by our webmaster for the content of the show. And he'll post it on the website as a YouTube for those who are going to be missing it tonight. So David, did you give yourself an introduction to the crowd? I will just review David and Mike. Mike, you've got you're taking the lead on this one first. So I'd just like to explain to those who are listening, in case anyone is not familiar with it, that Mike studied at the University of Western Ontario. He's a past president of the Federation of Canadian Artists and is also a senior member of this society. And the Federation of Canadian Artists have a tiered membership. So as a senior member, he is prominent in the society. He's an award-winning artist and a leading teacher and workshop instructor. Mike strongly believes that sharing knowledge among fellow artists and art students provides only positive results for all. His paintings are held in many private and corporate collections throughout the world, and his work has been featured in International Artist Magazine, Magazine Art, and in many newspapers throughout North America, and is also included in several art books. He's celebrating his 39th year as a professional artist, and he's mastered watercolors, acrylics, and oils, and he's an impressionist, and he's easily identified by a strong use of strong, bold color. He's had over 75 exhibitions, and he's produced 25 large-scale murals throughout North America. He's also the sole creator, writer, producer, and marketer of all of his signature workshop courses over the past 39 years. Please help me welcome Mike Svob, who is going to take us into the country with the lovely cows.
Thank you, Bonnie. That was long, but Nancy wrote that. Nancy's my better half. Anyway. I started talking a little bit already. I just want to thank you guys for letting me do this, letting me be a juror on this. Like the part about sharing what I know and what I've learned as an artist. I was just writing and helping write an article for somebody, quite an old artist who's gonna pass away. I don't want to push him along, and I'm not going to say who it is, but one of the things I always liked about being an artist and the people that I met in the field are the people who shared everything with everybody else. And so I've always tried to do that. I've tried to give back, and being able to jury in a show like this is part of that. So I think it's a good thing. But I've got this here, and this is my shameless self-promotion part. where I show my paintings and I talk a little bit about what I do as an artist and the way I think about it. As I started telling people already, I started out painting in watercolor, and this is going to be a little bit of my journey. And this here is a painting of cows, obviously. I try to include some things which may be a little more relevant to, you know, what you guys are doing as, you know, as seeing from what you've entered in the show. So I try to include stuff that I think relates to that. You know, this watercolor here, and I've got a little story about everything like every artist, and I can talk ad nauseum, but the funny thing about this one, this is probably from the early to mid 80s. And my uncle still has the family farm in Ontario from way back, and he still had dairy cows at this time. And I would go back there. I worked on the farm as a kid and moved out west a long time ago, out to Vancouver, and I've lived out here from that point on. But this is a painting of cows, and I was at the farm one time after I'd started painting. When you start out as an artist, you know, I went to Western, and I didn't go to art school. I took all kinds of other stuff, but I never went to art school. But when I decided I wanted to be an artist, immediately you go home, the dog bites you, the bank won't talk to you, you'll lose half your friends, they all think you're crazy. It's kind of funny, but anyway, I went out to my Uncle Frank's farm, and I'm out there painting the cows. And Frank comes up and says, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm painting your cows." He says, "Why are you doing that?" I said, "Because, you know, I sell them, right? This is what I'm going to do, right, for a living, right?" And he says, "How much you get for a painting?" So I can't remember what I told him, right? Several $100s at the time, right? He said, "Damn," he says, "I don't make that on that cow in 10 years, right?" So I know it's kind of a funny story, right? So I thought I'd put it in there. But what I've always done as an artist is I got into this because I really didn't know what to do with myself as a person, as a career. And I went to business school, did all kinds of other stuff. And I came into this because I always loved it before I started, you know, as a professional. So I came into it because I loved it. And I decided that I was going to do this for a living, you know, and do whatever I wanted, or there's no point in doing it. So that's what I've done all the way along. So that's the first watercolor. Long-winded, but there's another one. This is obviously from out here on the West Coast, a couple of old fishing boats, which one of the things that happens as an artist is everything ages you, because this is, you know, 40 years old and all these boats are gone and things have changed. And it was one thing I painted a lot for a while. And, you know, as an artist, I've kind of moved around with the times, with the style, with the technique, but people who know me see a consistency in my work, and I don't, but they do. And I don't worry about that as an artist. Actually, I don't worry about anything as an artist. As long as I can make a living and get away with keeping on painting, I'm happy. So that's what I do. So here's some fishing boats. The next one here, now this is a painting I did, this is getting on close to 30 years ago, I guess now, or 25 years ago. I did a trip up to Haida with a Haida friend of mine, and we went to Ninstance and all these other places. And I painted all over the place up there. And this is just one of the little paintings I did on location at Ninstance. And one of the things about being an artist is, and I think we're going to talk a little bit about this, but it's the idea of, you know, whatever you paint, you know, the idea of appropriation, or should you paint this or should you paint that? Now, I've been, you know, I'm on the short end of this. Like, I've been doing this for a long, long time. And my way of thinking about it is, I've had people come up to me, you know, when I painted things, and tell me that I shouldn't be painting that, or I should be painting that, or everybody's got an idea of what I should be doing. But I've always felt what I'm doing as an artist is I'm trying to interpret the world for me, and then basically, hopefully somebody else relates to it, and then they buy it, and I make a living and I keep going. I'm not trying to say anything particular about anything. I don't have any political axe to grind. I've never had one. I do have political views, but I kind of leave it as to what's happening at the time. So at this time, 30 years ago, you know, this is where I went, this is what I painted, so I put it in here. And there it is, that's an oil painting. The next one here, this is my daughter. And she's holding one of the farm cats from, you know, running around on the farm. And I've just always painted whatever I wanted to paint. I painted my family, my dogs, my cats, you name it, everybody. So there's one of my daughter. Here's another one of my daughter when she's playing soccer and I was coaching. So I, you know, did paintings of her. And one of the things that I've learned about this and about being an artist is, and I'm going to speak to it with this one, is about what happens to you as an artist. Like the ideas I had going in were completely different, and they changed over the years as to what I could do, what I could get away with, what people liked. And, you know, the art school stuff, all the art school stuff I'd heard and all the art school stuff, I try to make sense out of it, like some of the things they'd say about you should do this, you shouldn't do this. I found in the long run, there are no rules in this. And in the end, I ended up doing and going and having the freedom, because I became successful, to paint and do whatever I wanted. So I've always loved the mountains, loved hiking, and I've done a lot of painting in the mountains. And here's one here. This is a little lake, Lake Olisa, and it's an oil again. And I've just included a bunch of oil paintings here. Here's another little boat. Some of these are on location. Like this is an on location painting. This is done on the coast here. It's a painting, you know, a painting like, oops, where'd it go? That one there. You know, I go out, I paint on location, plein air. It's a very, you know, big thing in the art business now. This is like 30, 40 years ago though. And I've always painted plein air. And some people, like in the arts, there's this idea, there's, you know, aesthetic, right? And it keeps changing. And the aesthetic now is that there's like some virtue to plein air painting, but I've never thought of it that way. I just like painting outside. One of the reasons I became an artist is because I could go wander around outside and get away with it. So this is just one of them. Here's another one. Now this one I put in because this is a snowy alley in Vancouver. And I've been in Vancouver for going on 40 years now. And I love the old parts of Vancouver. I like the idea in my paintings of things being higgledy-piggledy or abstract or kind of topsy-turvy. And these are some of the old alleys in East Vancouver. And I started painting down there in the 80s. And it's all changed now, but I like the, you know, the way it goes together. All my paintings are abstract to me in the sense that they're just shapes, values, colors, and edges. And then I try to find things that interest me and paint them and make them interesting. And this is an alley scene. Now, here's another alley scene. And with me and with most artists, I remember the first time somebody told me, you know, you're painting, you know, in this case, I'm painting alleys. And I got into painting these alley scenes. I probably did, I don't know, 400 or 500 of these over the years. But for a period of years, I did hundreds of them. And somebody said, you're just milking that, right? And I thought, oh, maybe I'm just milking it, right? Maybe I should move on. And there is no right or wrong way to look at this in that sense. You know, you should do what you want to do as an artist, or there's not much point in doing it. And when you get tired of it, you move on, right? So for a long time, I did alleys and I moved on. This here is a little painting of the Grand Canyon. And for about 20 years, I had an airplane. I had enough money to buy an airplane and fly around. So I'd fly around all over the place. And this is just a painting from the air of the Grand Canyon. I didn't paint it in the airplane. It was just, you know, I was in the airplane, took some pictures, and, you know, and on it goes. And again, some more cows. These are West Coast cows as opposed to East Coast cows. And this is another on-location painting, some little buildings from Ucluelet in BC on the West Coast. Again, when I do these, when I paint on location, the one thing I've found about painting on location, and this has more to do with small paintings, it's the mental space you're in when you're being creative. So you think of an idea, because I'm outside, I've only got an hour or two to paint it before the light changes too much. So it's a really quick process. And when it goes well, it's really satisfying and it feels really good, right? Now that doesn't always mean the painting's good. It feels good. It feels fresh. It doesn't feel overworked. So that's why I include a bunch of them. This is one done in a similar way from the East Coast. Again, it's just an on location painting, one trip out to the East Coast. Another place I love because it's all kind of higgly-piggly and the shapes are abstract. This is Newfoundland from a trip I did out there many years ago. This is an on location painting from France. I've been all over the place and painted. This is from a trip I did to the south coast of England about 20 years ago, I guess, this one. In a little town called Popero. And I'm just going to tell you a little story about this one. It's funny. Polpero's in Cornwall, which is the south coast of England. And when we showed up there were about 4 or 5 of us in a group. We went to paint, and we were in this town for 2 weeks. For the first couple of days, nobody would talk to us because they thought we were all from London. And the one interesting thing I found out about people in Cornwall is they all talk like pirates. They have the pirate accent, And the little kids, they talk like pirates. The adults talk like pirates. Everybody talks like pirates. And it was just so much fun. Anyway, I thought I'd put this one in. This is just from a little tiny town. Again, another painting in the mountains. This one's an acrylic from the Bow Valley. This is from Eastern Canada, Ontario. I painted one winter back there. Another one. Again, this is my daughter and a friend of hers. This is an acrylic from the West Coast. Another one. This is from here in, what's the name of the island? I forget the name of the island. But anyway, it's another painting from the West Coast. This is a larger painting I did on location of sailboats and mountains. Another one of boats. I could talk about technique, but I don't think I'm going to. If you have any questions about technique, I can always talk about it later. This is one of the first acrylics I did that was other than, a little tiny one where I'm fooling around. This is one of the dude ranches from up in the Caribou in BC. And I quite liked this one at the time. I thought it was quite fun. Here's one from Emerald Lake in the Rockies. Snow scene, painted dozens of snow scenes. Ooh, there's another one from the trip I did down, flew around the Grand Canyon. Here's another one of Lake Oisa. I painted, some of these places over and over again. You go back, at different times of year, over the years, your ideas change, and you see it in a new light. And this is one place I've been back to many, many, many times. I don't know how many times, and I love to go there and paint. The first time I went was in the 70s, but I didn't paint them. The first time I painted it was in the 80s. I've probably been back like 15, 20 times since, and I go up there and paint. Here's another one from France. I painted all over Europe. I spent a fair bit of time over there. I used to go over there for several months a year. Here's another one from East Coast, Nova Scotia. Here's one from New Hampshire, Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And this one's just a couple years old. I painted this a few years ago. My daughter got married. She's all grown up. She married a boy from Boston. Now they live on the East Coast. So now I'm painting on the East Coast of the US. But here's a painting from there. Here's one from Mexico. I used to go to Mexico and spend part of the winter down there. And I painted all kinds of stuff from down there. Mexico and other places, like that were kind of nice as an artist because you can go and stand there and paint outside because it's relatively dry and you don't have to be inside. So it's a chance to paint outside on location. Here's one I did from the Stampede many, many years ago of a female RCMP officer. And I put it in because I do people, I do whatever, I mix it up. Here's a bear I painted. This is actually from somebody else's photo. This is from a friend of mine, Sylvia. We grew up together back east, and she became bear photographer, and that's what she does. And she sends me all kinds of photos, and I did this painting from one of her photos. And it's just one of those things. This is another painting from Mexico that I did on location of this woman. Here's one of the prairies, another on location piece. I think it's Alberta, though. I don't think it's any further east than that, but painted a fair bit in Alberta. This is my wife, Nancy, and our little dog, and another alley scene. And this is one of the paintings I kept. I've kind of learned over the years, or I made a decision years ago, and I've tried to keep it going. As an artist, when I started to become successful and I could sell basically everything I did, I looked around and I got to know quite a few successful artists who were old, and some of them couldn't paint anymore, and they'd been quite successful, and they didn't have any of their work. And their work was trading in some cases for hundreds of thousands of dollars, but they didn't own any of it. So everybody thinks they became rich. And what really happened is everybody else became rich off their artwork. And I decided, well, I really don't want that to happen to me. Not that I'm rich or I'm going to become rich. So I made myself a pact. I said, I'm going to keep 2 or 3 paintings a year, and I've kept 2 or 3 every year through my whole career. And I don't even show them to people usually, because they always think you're keeping the best ones, or you've got some sort of, secret reason for keeping these. And it's just that I wanted to keep them, so I had some for my kids, so I had some for my old age, so I had a remembrance of what I did. So this is just one of those paintings, and a lot of them are personal like that. Okay, this is Lake Louise, a painting I did of Lake Louise a few years ago, an acrylic painting. Here's another one of Lake Louise. Of all the things I've painted, Lake Louise has got to be number 1 on the list. I do not know how many times I've painted it. Don't feel guilty if you paint the same thing over and over. I don't. And one of the things that really twigged for me is when I feel guilty about something, I think about what's happened in the art world over the years. And Monet painted about 48 haystack paintings that I know of, and probably about 1,000 lily pad paintings that I know of. So if it's good enough for Monet, it's good enough for anybody else. So I figure you can paint anything as much as you want and over again. And every time you do it, you want to make it a little better than the last one, or a little more interesting, or explore what you think you can get out of it. So Lake Louise has always been my muse, so to speak. And I don't know how many times I've painted it, maybe 100 times, maybe 200 times. I don't know. I don't keep track of stuff like that. But I threw a few of these in here. Here's another one of Lake Louise in the winter, kids skating in front of it. This is Moraine Lake, another place I love in the mountains. I spent a lot of time there. Yeah, I missed one. Here's another one of Moraine Lake in the summer. The previous one, that's in the winter. This is in the summer. Okay. Here's one of a little waterfall, or a rapids, cataract, whatever you want to call it. And some of these paintings are really big. This one's a really big painting. Some of them are smaller, but this is a bigger one. And this is an acrylic. You can see what it's called. Here's one. I think this is on the Manitoba Saskatchewan border, so I put it in here. I was going up to Saskatoon one time to do something, and I spent a few extra days and drove around and started this painting on location. I finished it at home, so it's one of the few prairie paintings I've done, so I wanted to include that. One of the other things I've done, this is a commission I did for somebody, and I just wanted to throw it in just to give you an idea of some of the other things you might do as an artist, or what I've done, so you get an idea of what I've done. And this is obviously for a family, and they just gave me a whole bunch of photos, and I did kind of a montage, and this is the drawing of it. And it's rough because I've moved and changed and rearranged things over and over again until I get it to a place where I'm kind of happy with it. And usually I show it to them and they say okay or nay or whatever, but that's just to give you an idea. And then I've got another one that I did. This is kind of a funny one. When somebody asked me to do this, they had a bunch of my paintings, but nothing like this. And they said, we want you to do a painting of our family, and we want it to be kind of a Mad Hatter theme. And all these symbols in here mean something. So I put them all in, put it together, and I was miserable doing it. But when I got it done, I thought, hey, that was a lot of fun, but I don't want to do any more. It was just too much work, but it was a lot of fun to do. So I just included it for that reason. So I do kind of vary all over the place. What I don't have in here is, here's a bigger one I did of the Rockies, looking back to the foothills. What I don't have in here is I did quite a few large scale things, like installations, murals, and some things were sculpture. And they got huge, but I haven't included them in here because I thought I'd keep it to smaller, sofa-sized paintings, I think is the word. These are more sofa-sized. Because this is what I really enjoy. The other stuff is more, it's too long a thought process. I like the shorter thought process and the more instant reward, where you take it in all at once. So the smaller ones are like that. And here's another little alley scene. Some of these are like different techniques, and I can go into that if you ever want to come to one of my workshops or whatever, or if you want to get one of the books I did or something. But anyway, this is another technique that I teach a lot. And I should just mention, I did that in a workshop and I put it in so I could just, give you an idea. There's a couple paintings here I did from Greece. Now these last ones, I don't know how I'm doing with time, but these last ones here are more recent. All the previous ones were scattered over, 40 years, but these last few are more recent. And I think I've become a little more realistic in the last year or two, or maybe 3. I don't know. I don't worry about it. I just do whatever I want. This is from Greece, another place I love, and I've been back to several times. There's another one of Greece. The light, the color, the Mediterranean, the transparency, it's just a beautiful place. The colors are beautiful, there's so many beautiful things about it. So I like to paint there, and that's another one from there. This one is one I just did, I guess this spring or the early summer. And it's a sunset on the beach down below me here where I live. So I thought I'd put this one in. And I mean, I've only done a couple of sunset kind of things in my whole life, but last winter with the COVID and everything, I spent a lot of time walking up and down the beach and thinking about, not being able to go anywhere. And so I finally painted my beach, which I've never painted before. And this is one of them after walking up and down for all these days, all last winter. And I'll be doing it again this winter probably because there's not much traveling going on yet, but this is one of them. And I was quite happy with the way it turned out. One of the things that happens as an artist, I find, is when I look back at my work over the years, and you'll probably do this too, like you look back at your work over time, and the ones that are way back, you can't remember why you painted them, how you painted them. You have an idea of when you painted them and maybe what they're of, but why you did it and why you did it that way, you kind of lose track of. And so all you see is you see them as if somebody else painted them. I don't look at them and think, I painted that because I can't remember why. So I can't give it a critique or a sense of, what I would do because I'm a different person now. So over time, you kind of lose your sense of what you did, which is probably a good thing, but you gain a new sense of, what you want to do, and you just move on, right? And this is the last one I did. It's the last one in my slideshow here. And this is the beach down below where I live. And originally I had a few figures in this and I took them out because I thought it made it a little more peaceful. So I took the figures out. And anyway, that's it. This is a larger piece, but now just a last thing about the shameless self-promotion. I've made my living selling my artwork for 40 years now. And it's been a lot of fun and I've been very lucky. And I don't know, when I'm speaking to people now, I know when I started out, I used to, if I was teaching people, I would think about it and talk about it quite differently. But the idea of, getting acceptance of your work, for me, because I have a family, I didn't have any support as far as, money or anything to that. I always had to sell my work. to make a living. So I kind of moved all over the place, and I found what worked for me. Now, I know you guys are, some of you might be interested in selling your work or maybe where you want to go as an artist. But what I wanted to do was paint paintings. So it was important for me to sell my work or to derive enough income from my work so I could keep painting. So I always kind of sold my work, and I was lucky enough to sell enough of it and became successful enough so that I could get away with doing whatever I want. And I've always done what I want, and I'm still doing what I want. So it's a nice life that way. And it's a good goal to aim for, but I know other people want different things out of this. But my stroking or, my feedback was, people telling me they liked my work was always nice. But if somebody purchased a piece of my work, and my work's not cheap, it's not really expensive, but it's not cheap. It was always, a real positive input, which means I really like it and I can keep going. I can keep moving forward because, they've allowed me to do that. So the people who buy your work or the people who tap you on the shoulder and say it's nice or, they like it, I can't afford it now, maybe I'd buy one in the future or whatever, are really important to you as an artist. So keep that in mind. When you're entering an art show like what you've done here, one of the things that happens, and I've juried hundreds of shows now, one of the things that happens when you enter your paintings in a show is the jurors, and it's David and I on this one, right? We have a certain perspective, I guess is the nice word, or a certain axe to grind, which is another way of putting it, right? I mean, I don't know, what David's axe is. He seems like a really good guy. We just met. He seems like a really decent guy, and we got along great in the jurying, and there was no problems at all. I've been in other jurying with people where they just didn't like anything in the show, and it makes it really difficult. They have a real attitude about whatever. But so when you enter a show, you don't know what the jurors are going to do. In this case, you're talking to the jurors. Usually I don't talk to people. I'm just jurying the show, and I'm sure David's probably had the same experience. You don't even talk to people. You just go through them, and you pick what you think is credible, interesting, and what catches your fancy, so to speak. And so if you don't get in, the only thing that means is those jurors had bad taste and put your stuff in another show, and hopefully you run into some jurors who have good taste, okay? Now, if anybody's got any questions about that or any of the stuff I talked about, I don't know how much time I got left, but feel free, and here I am, okay? And I'm gonna shut this off, my stop share, so we go back to the.
Thank you very much, Mike. Yes, we do have time for questions. It's a little different online. When we're in person, we just put our hand up or stand up or something. But if you can either wave, or if you know how to use the raise hand function, you can do that. But this works as well. Is there anyone who has a question of Mike on what he has spoken of or his work that he's shown?
Any questions? No questions. Okay. Oh, hold on.
No.
Oh, there's a question. Okay, from Jen. I'll read it out. It says, beautiful work, Mike. Oh, I lost it. It ran away. It said something about underpainting. Can you put that back up, Jen? It disappeared. I guess it was a question about the underpainting in some of my paintings. I'm going to assume she means by that in technique in painting, people use terms like underpainting or preliminary or blocking in or all kinds of things. And underpainting generally refers to, giving the canvas or board or panel or whatever it is you work on some sort of preliminary coat of paint or texture or combination of, or a preliminary drawing. It can mean a lot of different things. And of all the paintings you saw here, they would all qualify as having an underpainting pretty much. The only other way to paint is to paint absolutely directly, I guess, where you'd kind of do a paint by numbers thing. But basically, almost all paintings, almost all artists use an underpainting. Okay, anybody else?
Yeah, I do have a question of you. Now, I noticed that your colors are very high intensity, extremely. How much mixing do you do, for one thing, in the chosen palette? And then how long did it take you as an artist to decide on that? Did you experiment with palettes, or did you just go for what spoke to you and stayed with that because it was meaningful?
Yeah. I'm kind of known as a colorist. Like that's what people tell me. I don't think of myself that way, but the way I think of it, and the reason I got to where I am, is I paint the paintings the way I want to see them. All right, and that's a long process because until you paint it the way you see it, you don't know what you're looking for. And when you're starting out, you have an idea of maybe what you want to see, but you don't know how to get there. And with time, your technique advances, your ability advances, your familiarity with the materials advances, everything advances, and you learn more by practice about what's possible. So you try combinations of colors, values, shapes, ideas, and you get better at it. With practice, you get better. And this really is a thing where you have to practice a lot and you have to be very intimate with it. If you want to, produce a lot of paintings and be successful at it, you really have to work hard at it, put a lot of time in. And the time really is put in experimenting until you get something that speaks to you, that's interesting. And that's how I got to where I am. It's not a sort of thing where I take out a book and I say, okay, this color goes with this color and that color goes with that color. The painting speaks to me once I start, and it tells me what I need to do to get it to where I want to see it. And that's what I do.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Are there any other questions?
Nope. Okay.
Well, I'd like to say thank you very much for a very interesting talk. I certainly got a lot out of that, and I enjoyed looking at the variety of your artwork because it was interesting to me when you said you were an abstract artist, and I started to realize that if you identify as an abstract artist, then of course you can paint figures and landscapes and boats and anything, because they are all just shapes, and you're organizing them into a composition and working with your lights and your darks based on shapes and forms and colors as well. So that opened a new a point of view for me on that. So thank you very much for that, Mike.
All right. Thank you.
We'll move now to our second speaker. David Garneau is our juror from Regina. David Garneau, Métis, is a professor of visual arts at the University of Regina. His practice includes painting, curation, and critical writing. He's interested in creative expressions of contemporary Indigenous identities. Garno recently curated Kawatsuratatye, I hope I got that pronunciation right. It's the Contemporary Native Art Biennial in Montreal 2020, with assistance from Faye Mullen and Rudy Ocker. He co-curated with Kathleen Ash Milby and Transformer, Native Art in Light, and Sound National Museum of the American Indian in New York in 2017. He's curated a number of shows, and some of them are international. He's with Secrecy and Despatch, Tess Ellis, an international exhibit about massacres of Indigenous people and memorialization for the Campbelltown Arts Centre, Sydney, Australia. So it's quite an international exposure that our second juror has to the art world. He has recently given keynote talks in Australia, New Zealand, the United States, and throughout Canada on issues such as misappropriation, public art, museum display, and contemporary Indigenous art. His paintings are in numerous public and private collections. Please help me welcome David Garneau. David, I think you were going to speak with and not use images. So yep. What I'd like everyone to do is put ourselves on mute while you're speaking, or did you want them to?
You know what? I'm going to be talking, but if you've got something at a certain point, if you say, whoa, 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 don't, you're going too fast. I want to know a bit more about this. You can stop me, but you'll have to say it because I won't see your faces. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to put mine on then on speaker view so that I can look at you as a speaker.
Okay, that sounds good. So thanks everybody for joining us here, and thank you Bonnie Taylor and the Manitoba Society for Artists for the invitation to participate, especially on the jury, but also to speak with you tonight. And thank you to Mike, my fellow juror. It is really amazing. We really got along well, and our tastes are similar in the sense that I'm a realist painter. Right now I'm doing still life paintings that will be touring across Canada, and there will be a book with it too in a couple of years. But I also do, I guess you would call them historical or political work. I do landscape painting. I just love painting. That's what we have in common. We love painting. I love representation. I do abstract work as well. Currently some special projects. But I really like telling a story, moving people emotionally and mentally. So I'm zooming to you from Edmonton, where I'm in. Oh, and the other thing I want to say, it reminded me, is I taught with Lisa Streifler, who's now living in Winnipeg, and we taught together for about 20 years here in Regina, and we're opposites. She's very expressive, expressionist, extrovert. I'm more introverted and analytic. And whenever we would have a student and we both agreed upon their work, you know, we'd always be at loggerheads, but we agreed, then we were right. If one of us disagreed or one of us agreed, then it was our opinion. But if we both agreed, you better be sure, you better fix that thing. So as I said, I'm zooming from Edmonton, where I'm installing a large public art installation. The Tiesenhausen Bridge is a 2-decker bridge going across the river, and the top part is a train, and the bottom part is a pedestrian way. And so I've got more than 400 paintings that are being bolted to the ceiling of the bottom part of the train track and the top part of the pedestrian way. And this is the largest commission I've been involved with. It's been a nightmare because I can't just paint what I want. And I hate commissions. I'm a much more of an individualist, but for this one, I did a lot of research. I worked with the Cree, particularly Jerry Saddleback, and with Chief Calvin Bruno and the Papas Chase Cree that were sort of dissolved out of there years ago, and I've got a family connection with. And but it's also animals and plants all in the region, and in the Métis Nation. So actually, I'll tell you a little bit about my family. So just down or upriver from the bridge is my great-grandparents, Laurent and Garneau's river lot. They lived in Red River, and they moved after the 1869-70 resistance, where the invaders came in and life was pretty hard for Métis resistors. They moved to Fort Edmonton, and they got a lot right across from the fort, which River Lot 7, which the university is sort of slowly encroaching on. And so I knew about this history, but I didn't know, for instance, that the city, just like Winnipeg, was founded on these river lots. It's sort of been erased by the grid. So that became interesting to me. So I've done a lot of paintings about that grid system overwhelming the Métis, and just a different organizing sensibility to life. Around the turn of the century, the Garnos left Edmonton to a Métis community at St. Paul that Father Lacombe set up. And so the Tiesenhausen Bridge is just down for that. And it's meant to be kind of a reconciliation site where all these things are brought together: settler histories, First Nations, Métis. And prior to that, I started the paintings with myself and a crew of about a dozen, but I also worked on the Indigenous Cultural Center, which is this multi-million-dollar project in Fort Edmonton, as a visual designer. So if you walk in there, there's all kinds of projections of animation. They're all based on my paintings, and there's floor projections. It's pretty incredible. I mentioned those things because that's what I'm doing currently. Mostly I'm an easel painter. That's what I'm doing currently, just to show a range. But also, as was mentioned, I'm a curator. I curated at the Museum of the American Indian and the Montreal Biennale, the Indigenous Biennale last year, or almost a year and a half ago now. And so as an artist, I started, my first solo show was in 1980 at the Bear Claw Gallery, which is an Indigenous gallery in Edmonton here. And I liked the commercial scene, but it wasn't enough for me. I wanted to make significant paintings with content, and I wanted them to be in major galleries. So yes, I wanted to make a living off of art, but I decided I was going to make a living primarily being a professor and being a writer. And my paintings wouldn't have the burden of having to put food on the table. I don't know how Mike does it. It would stress me out to have eggs all in one basket like that. But it's very admirable to do that. But I wanted to free my paintings up to do things that I want to do that would be politically difficult, but to me important. And so I had to come up with strategies as how do I get something not into someone's living room, but into these, well, I've got a piece in the National Gallery, I've got pieces in many major collections, and the United Nations building in New York and embassies in LA, and I forgot the other place. So how do I get that content in there? And so I had to come up with an understanding of the art world, how it works. And so rather than talk about my art, I am going to talk to you about the sort of three levels of the art world, which is the amateur, professional, and the critical, and some practical ways that you get from one level to another, or want to avoid like hell going to the other levels because they're so horrible. Each level up, listen, this is not something you generally want to do. And some people keep thinking, well, actually, I've got a good sentence here. I better read this. So I'm going to try and answer some of the most uncomfortable questions I get asked as a curator, an editor, an arts writer. So I've been doing arts writing since about 1980. I was a reviewer for all throughout the 90s, lots of critical reviews. And people would always be asking me, well, this is the sentence I came up with. My paintings are as good as her paintings. How come I didn't get into the exhibition? How come I didn't get the grant? How come I didn't get the award or get mentioned in the article? Now, Mike gave you the impression that it's a matter of opinion. That's kind of true, but the opinions are formed within discourse communities, and certain things fit and certain things don't fit. And you should make your work for the places that fit and not be bumping your head against things that are not going to let you enter. Okay, so Mike gave you a perfect example of something that I talk to my students about, right? I got students, they're painting mostly regular stuff, you know, country scenes, family members, all of that kind of thing. And when I say, well, do you want to have sales or do you want to have a career? And, well, can't I have both? I said, yep, but you got to be very careful. So if you sell everything out of your studio, you won't have curators come knocking on your door. You won't be in the higher galleries, so to speak, if that's what you want, because you can't put together certain kinds of shows with a curator who will support it and write about it if you sell everything. So as Mike says, you got to hold stuff back. You have to hold back. This series of still life paintings, I've sold a fair number of them, and some of them are the best ones. It was a big mistake because now I got to get them back for the show. This is a difficult thing. So anyways, I'm just going to walk through some of the things, and it's going to sound philosophical, but I think you're going to go, wow. I hope. I could be wrong. So most of the comments I'm talking about come from two philosophers. One is Arthur Danto, who's a big hero of mine. He was just a wonderful guy. I actually met him in Winnipeg just before he died. The border crossings folks had him out there to do a talk, and they knew how much of a fan I was that they invited me over, and we had just some great conversations. But here's this guy, he comes back from the Second World War, and he decides, you know, he doesn't want to follow the daily grind. He wants to be an artist. He becomes a master printmaker. And in 1964, he goes into a gallery and there's an Andy Warhol show, the Brillo boxes. And he says, how is this art? Right? They look just like regular Brillo boxes. It's boxes with the paintings of the Brillo logo on it. And he said, how is this art? So he came up with this whole system to try and figure out how something becomes art, even when it doesn't have what we would call aesthetic qualities. I'm not going to go into his whole debate, but I'm going to talk about the 3 conditions he says that a work of art must have. And it's really helpful, very practical, and very obvious. So first of all, he says artworks have to have a title. And that seems obvious and even silly, but it's actually very profound. A title is a name, and naming is among the most meaningful things we do. So for instance, years ago, I was helping a woman named Judith Huang do her autobiography, and she was born in the turn of the century. She ran a woman's prison during the Second World War in China. And she said to me that she didn't get her name until she was 2 years old. And I was kind of stunned. Why the long gap? You know, in some cultures, people wait for a sign, you get a name. In other cultures, if you don't have a name and you die, you go to a dark place. You know, the name is like a very significant thing. And here it was is that when I did research, out of 6 children born, 5 died within the first 2 years. And so with child mortality so high, parents wouldn't give the name until after that 2 years so that they wouldn't be attached, which is a horrible thing to think about. So naming and titling is a significant act. We are saying that this thing is more important than a mere real thing when we name something. We don't name everything. Nobody names their television. Nobody names tables, chairs, furniture. You might name your car or your boat or your motorhome or your cottage. And when you do so, you're saying this is more than just what it appears to be. It's something special. So when artists title their work, they are saying that this is a symbolic gesture that says this has got something more to it. Okay. Now, people talk about the craft art debate. It's solved right there. If you're throwing pots, you don't title them. That's craft. If you're an artist like Leopold Fulham or Paul Mathieu who works in clay and you title your work, then yes, then it's a work of art. But most people know that it's not a work of art. So titling is among the most significant things we do. So in terms of titling, it's an absolutely firm rule that works of art have to have titles, absolutely firm. Even in the 1950s, Mike was talking about formalism, where you're interested in shapes and colors and all that. That field, that's called formalism. That's saying the form and the content are one thing. And in that period, Jackson Pollock and others, they would give their works untitled or a number. And the reason why they did that, they claimed, is they didn't want the language to interfere and cause people to see things in there that they didn't think were there, right? So some of them were hardcore materialists, and they wanted you to see that it's just paint on canvas. That's Clement Greenberg. On the other side, there were people who were like Rothko, spiritually minded, and they didn't want you to be grounded in earthy things. They wanted you to have a flight up into a transcendental realm. So there's 2 sides to that same coin. But even then, they knew that it's a firm rule, so they had to call it untitled or give it a number. It is an absolute rule. Okay. The second quality it has to have, and this is a tough one. It's called, Danto uncreatively calls it aboutness. He says that every work of art, and we're just going to, because most of the submissions were painting, we're going to talk about paintings. It makes it easier for me. He says every work of art is about something. So obviously a representational work, a painting of a horse, is a representation of that horse. And we were talking about, Bonnie mentioned abstraction. So abstraction means a painting, in this case, we're just talking about paintings, it means that it refers to something in the natural world. Okay, you can look at it, it can be smears and blobs and whatever, but you're gonna see some horsiness in there, or you're gonna see a bit of a landscape or a sunset or something like that. So it has aboutness. And when Danto was challenged, because he loved abstract art, or what I'm gonna call now non-objective art. So non-objective painting means that there's no reference to the natural world. So that's the difference between non-objective painting and abstract painting. Abstract painting, however loose and expressive, it still has an anchor in the real world. Non-objective painting is like Mondrian, or I would say Rothko too. And often they have a spiritual dimension. Both those artists were spiritual. Mondrian was a theosophist, and he believed that these pure colors literally connected you to sort of that Platonic perfection. And Rothko, he was a little fishier about his spirituality, but certainly there's a Rothko chapel, and the connection of his work to being able to contemplate and meditate is very important. And so what Danto says, yeah, but all those artists are quoting other artists, right? You can't go down and start painting an abstract painting without someone saying, well, that looks like a Jackson Pollock, or that looks like a Rothko, or that looks like a Klein. So he argued that even painting always comes from other painting. We saw Mike's paintings. You can see this guy comes from Canada. There's a group of 7 influence in there. And then when he goes to France, my God, that building looks like the House of the Hangman by Cézanne. You know, it's like you're absorbing the history and quoting it back to us. So we don't just see things as they are. They're always translated through the way we've learned and what we've learned, what we've looked at in painting. So that's a form of aboutness too. So your first goal, you know, if you want to enter the art world, is to make sure that your work is not just a painting, but a work of art. So here we have the difference between being a painter and an artist. And I love that Mike kept referring to himself as an artist. He makes paintings, but he has the identity of an artist. That means that I'm more than a mere human being, right? I'm an artist. This is essential, okay? Now, I don't tell all my students this because most of them are painters, but every so often, and certainly all my grad students, they aspire to be artists. That's something more. And it means, you got to be humble about it, but in your secret heart of hearts, you know you're doing something special. And this is key. You are doing, every time you take time away from the dishes, childcare, crops, whatever it is, and you're sitting at that easel, you have to have an expanded ego that says, I deserve to be here. All you have to think of is the Lascaux caves, or any other time where back in, you know, the Stone Age, people said, yeah, you go back there in the cave and paint because we value that, right? This is a special thing. It's not hunting, gathering, cooking, childcare. You go there because you do it really well. So recognizing your specialness goes along the same time as that your artwork has some specialness. You're doing something that not everybody can do, wants to do, will do, but everybody, when you reach a certain level, will admire it, right? They will understand that it's special. This is significant. This is not a minor thing. It's along there with naming. When you name yourself an artist, you have to go back in time. When did I say I was going to be an artist? I don't know if you know the artist Peter von Tiesenhausen. He's an environmental artist, incredible painter too, just incredible. At the age of, I think he was 35, he lives way up in Demet, Alberta, which is northeast of Grand Prairie. And when at the age of 35 or so, he was a roughnecker. He did all kinds of oil patch work. He quit to become a full-time artist. And so he made a fence, like a 6-foot length fence for every year that he was an artist. And then now it's, you know, quarter acre long, I'm sure. And but it was his commitment that if he stopped, you know, for a year or so, there would be that big gap or whatever. But you have to have these markers that say, yes, I've made this decision. So even if I'm not painting for a year, I'm keeping my kit out, my easel up, and making me feel guilty, of course. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about quality of titles. There's a sliding quality of titles. So for example, horse for a painting of a horse is a weak title. It's not really a title, but a bare description, and it doesn't distinguish itself from other horse painters. So good titles hint at meanings and qualities beyond what is obviously represented. Okay, so I know that Mike says that he is just painting what he likes, but I also see a questing mind there. I'm so glad you showed us this range of your career, because this is a person who's not content to stay at home, right? And there's a sense of entitlement that the special quality of being an artist allows you to go anywhere. I loved when you were talking about that. And everybody gives deference to an artist. You walk in with your paints because you're going to do something special on that site. You are granted access to go wherever you want. It's an incredible privilege, right? But then you have to pay back by making a great work of art. So there's a responsibility with that as well. So for me, that extends to the titles. Okay, so horse, that's not a very good title. It's just, and if you feel like you use the word cookie cutter, if you're going to do back alley scenes and you know those are bread and butter paintings, then you're not going to be very creative with the title, and you're letting us know that too. If you go with thoroughbred horse, it's still a description, but it's a little bit better. But if you had as a title, you got a picture of a horse and it says, "A love greater than my father's." Now that's a title, right? But can imagine the burden of making a title each time for every painting. It can be pretty tough. But certainly what you're saying is that not only am I saying this thing is elevated status, I'm proving that there's this content that's higher. Has anybody seen the TV show The Sopranos? And there's that great scene where with the horse painting, and Tony sees it as an affront, and Paulie sees it as his general. It goes back and forth. The meanings will shift, but they all saw that it had a status more than just a painting of a horse. It has so much meanings attached. And this is the thing, what people buy at just past the very lowest level is they like what they see. It's familiar to them. Oh, I'll tell a story. My dad worked in Imperial Oil in a tower in Calgary. He had two paintings. And on the summertime, he put up a winter scene. And in the wintertime, he put up a summer scene. And it's just perfect. Art usually represents something that's absent, not there right in front of us. And it makes us long for that thing, right? And so we paint it in an extra special way, a beautiful way. But the title can also give you a sense of that content, not only just the place, the time, whatever, but what you were feeling about it. My mom's an antiquer. She loves antiques, but she can point to any antique that she's got and it's got a story attached. That's the thing. This bridge that I'm putting all this artwork up, I'm not writing down the meanings. It's chock full of meanings, histories, all kinds of things. Some elders and story keepers and I are going to walk through there in May. They're going to tell all their stories. Nothing will be recorded, written down. They've got to pass it on to generations. From the Indigenous point of view, things are not just things. They're attached to bodies, relationships, histories, and stories. So your artwork, to be that next level beyond formalism, is about stories and storytelling. So I mentioned the word art world. Well, that was actually coined by Arthur Danto. Arthur Danto, have you ever heard the term art world? He coined it in an article on Andy Warhol in 1964. And so what Danto says, it's called the institutional theory. He says that before you're painting in the studio, what you make is a painting. It isn't a work of art until it enters the art world. This sounds incredibly cruel, but I'm here to tell you this is how it works. So you and your friends can call that painting a work of art if you like, but it's only when it enters into an art gallery, an art museum, an art magazine, or art book, then it's sanctified by the art world. And I want to give you an analogy, and it's an example from medicine. For me, the art world is very similar to other worlds. It's not exceptional until it is. There are times when it is totally the opposite of what you would think. So picture this. 12 years ago, I was deep in the woods near Lac La Ronge, which is in northern Saskatchewan, fishing with a buddy. He had been complaining of lower abdominal pains for the last few days. That morning, he woke up and he had terrible cramps. Now, it just so happened that the week earlier, I had been reading online how to perform an emergency appendectomy. And I told him, buddy, I'm pretty sure that you've got appendicitis and you got to get it out of you or you're going to die. And I mentioned we're in the middle of nowhere, no cell service. And I said to him, I can do this. And I told him the story about what I'd seen on YouTube, and he's passing in and out of consciousness. And I figure from the way his head is contracting with spasms that he's giving me the consent to try. So I heat up the hunting knife, I cleanse it with whiskey that we just happen to have around. I peel back his shirt. I will spare you the gory details, but I cut out the offending organ and I stitched him up with fishing line. We rested in the camp for about a week and he really got in better shape. And then we brought him to the hospital in Prince Albert. Oh, this is a story. This isn't real. I have to tell you, this is an analogy. So the doctor looks at him and he says, "This is amazing." And he had to open him up because just to check out for sure. He says, "This is amazing. Your buddy actually did have appendicitis and my surgery was satisfactory. Though they took out the fishing line and they put in dissolvable stitches and so on. But because I was able to do the surgery and could do it again, does that make me a doctor?" So the doctors are regulated by medical boards. They have training and licenses. I can do that one surgery. I can call myself a doctor if I like. My friends can call me a doctor if they like. But according to doctors and the law, I'm not a doctor. Now, art's like this, not completely, but artists can go for training and get degrees, right? I got students, as I mentioned, they get a BFA. That doesn't make them an artist. I can make them a painter. I promise them I will make you a painter, but I can't promise to make them an artist. Most degrees will teach you how to paint, but being an artist takes a lot more work, a lot more chutzpah, that's for sure. So not all paintings are art and not all painters are artists. So like doctors getting certified by a board, artists get confirmed by the art world. Just as the object does, so does the person. So it's not enough that your grandmother and friends say you're an artist. Similarly, and this is significant, you might not be able to sell enough paintings for the Canada Revenue to consider your art practice anything more than a hobby. But in this regard, their opinion doesn't matter. Not even getting an art degree grants you artist status. You can get a medical degree from the university, but it's the medical board, separate from the university, that grants you a license to practice or not. It's similar, but it's not as rigorous for us artists. You get that board certification, you got it, unless you do something really horrible. Artists are always questioning themselves. So painters become artists when they join a guild, for example. And what happens there, just like with the medical board, their peers agree that they're artists. But just like the medical board, you're tested all the time. So if you're putting your work in the exhibition, you're testing yourself. Is this good? Is this not? And there's where Mike's right. Sometimes it really is just a crapshoot. Two guys come in, they like something better than something else. But I'm telling you that our choices were right, because here we are, two very different people, and we like pretty much the same things. No, it could be otherwise. Especially when you're applying for grant, I totally agree with them. You apply 1 year, you have one kind of jury, you apply the next year with the exact same project, and you get the grant. Some of it is a crapshoot. So painters become artists when they join a guild, when their peers agree that they're artists, and their work becomes art when a gallerist or curator includes their work in an exhibition. So you can sell yourself online and so on. That doesn't make you an artist. There has to be peer review or curatorial review. So being an artist rather than a painter is an elevation of status. And the painting in the studio is a mere real thing until it enters the art world. It sounds simple, but it's actually really profound and a complex operation. And it gets really weird the higher you get up that pyramid. Really strange. As soon as major money's involved, it's another world. So you've made your paintings and you've given them thoughtful titles. Actually, let's pause here. I need to talk about titles a bit more. So at the bottom of the pile are jokey, corny, and awkward titles. Next are poetic phrases that are evocative, but they don't seem to relate to the painting at all. Puns are next. Some of you put puns in there that are pretty atrocious. However, I've got a soft spot for puns. The ceramist Greg Pace out of Calgary has this hilarious set. I don't know if you know his work, but he has two vessels. And if you look in the middle, you'll see a person in the negative shape. They're really amazing. So he's got one set that's got two footprints, and he calls them paradox, like a paradox, image, but also a pair of Doc Martens. Sometimes the titles are corny, but they work. Neutral titles are the safest, especially if your content is familiar, or if it is just a street scene, calling it street scene in Paris or whatever, that's fine, rather than being pretentious and suggesting there's a meaning more than there is. But if you think of Night Cafe by Van Gogh, that makes it much more evocative, right? Untitled numbers and simple descriptions, a wheat field. Those neutral phrases are descriptive and slightly evocative. But the reason why a lot of people want to do it, especially if they have a formalist attitude, is they don't want to get it in the viewer's way, right? They want to just, here, go right through it. Don't worry about my concepts. However, I would say a slightly higher level is when the title is actually trying to say that there's some meaning here. There's content more than just a representation. And so when you go to, say, surrealist painters from the 1920s and 30s, you know, you've got Dali's The Persistence of Vision, or Magritte's The Treachery of Images. They had some really great titles that were telling you, hey, this work is poetic. There's more to it than just a picture of something. So now we have, this is very hard for artists to hear, but you got to hear me. Recording artists, pop stars, country and Western singers, they all have producers. Actors, they have directors. Writers, they have editors. These are all professionals who guide these artists to making better work. Work that reaches an intended market as well as satisfying artistic integrity. And who do visual artists have? If they're lucky, they've got artist mentors, teachers of some sort, but especially post-university. The Carfax mentorship group, the MAWA mentorship group, these are superior organizations. They're year-long commitments usually. I've mentored probably 4 or 5 artists now and 1 writer. And if they're very, very lucky, they've got a curator who work with them, not just for the one-off, but over time. That's an essential relationship. And if you see that person like a record producer or an engineer, studio and engineer, or like an editor, they're helping you see what you're actually doing, where you want to go, and where the gaps are. And it could be that, you know, if you're frustrated because you wanted your work to be in a certain place or get certain grants and you're not getting them, there are reasons why, but only a professional can really tell you. If it's an artist peer, they may not know, they have the same blind spots, but curators or art directors, they see things, I want to say, more objectively. I think I actually do believe that. So I mentioned there are 3 categories of art world. There's the amateur, professional, and what I'm calling the critical. So at the first stage is guild exhibitions, your art and cafe, featured in non-critical articles in local newspapers and self-published online. And there's nothing wrong with this, especially if art is your passion, your hobby. You don't want to have all these other voices, especially critical voices, after you. But for instance, there are no art reviews of amateur work, right? That doesn't happen. It's not a thing. Even professionals who are showing in, depending on the level of the gallery, will not ever get a critical review in their lives, even though they're selling all their work, right? Because it doesn't belong to that. And the reason is they're making work that is familiar, and the critics are looking for something that's new or fresh or contemporary. And each thing has, as I say, as you move up that pyramid, this range where people are basically making things that people don't like, and it has a critical response, that's a horrible way to live a life, I'm telling you. As a curator, I see it an awful lot. There are some people, many people, who hit the sweet spot. I don't know if you know of Zach Logan, who's still living in Saskatchewan, but he travels the world. He's making work that will be in the National Gallery, all these places. He's probably 40 by now, pretty young guy. He's managing to hit the sweet spot. And he's got stuff that critics want to write about. He's got stuff that very rich people want to buy. And yet he's a modest, down-to-earth guy. But it's very exceptional to do all of that. But it is still possible. Okay, I'm almost done here. Yeah, but if you want art world status, say on the professional level, past the guild and so on, even outside of your local community, which is the hardest one, is to getting outside of your local community. If you go to the professional status, there's a range of galleries, right? If you've got a gallery that's attached to a frame shop, that's sort of the lowest end. If you got a gallery that has uh, like a national gallery or public galleries that are separate from finance altogether. Each one of these is a different tier of art gallery. If you're showing, say, at the National Gallery or even at the Winnipeg Art Gallery, then you have access to all the other similar tiered galleries around the world even. But it has to be sponsored by a curator. It's a requirement. Sometimes a writer can step in a curator's role and make convincing statements, but it's almost always attached to a curator. Okay, I'm almost done, almost done. Okay, so what does it take to get in the door of that next level here? And by that I mean getting a grant, okay? So getting a grant is the main indicator of the difference between an amateur and the professional. And it's because you're going for peer review. Your work is being accepted not only on its visual merits, that's what happens in a shop when you sell your work, but also on its critical merits, which happens when you have to add a statement with the work. But in order to get to those stages, what you need, you have to have a complete and recent body of work. So that's at least 20 paintings that are no more than 3 to 5 years, depending on what the grant says. But you also have to be able to articulate what you've done and would like to do. You have to have a project that your peer artists think is worthy and that you can pull off. All this requires that you know what counts as worthy art with this peer group and not some generations ago. One reason to go to art school and to read art magazines and to talk to other artists is to learn what that discourse is, what's current. And I don't just mean fashionable. Fashion can have something to do with it, but literally things change over time in dramatic ways. So that's a big part of the art world. And if you're not into it, you're unlikely to move up the ranks. You literally have to learn this language, get a sense of what's going on there, or you will be always showing within the certain strata. But as I emphasize, that's not a bad thing. I have had students who are still painting fish and landscapes and whatever else 30 years later. Have I been teaching that long? Yeah, almost 30 years. And they're very happy people. I could be happy painting. I paint for a while there, I was painting roadkill. Don't ask me why, I don't want to go there. I'd still be a happy roadkill painter, but I loved it because I was halfway between the formalists and abstract painting and realist representation. Plus I died to want to bring them to one of these wildlife shows, you know, showing them. Anyways, it was perverse, but I did it for about 5-6 years. After grants, the next one are art residencies. So I taught for about 3 or 4 summers at, oh my gosh, I can't remember it, just north of Brandon there. Dinah Thornycroft and I and others were teaching. And there's another one where as a amateur or semi-professional, you're testing yourself, not in a school like for a diploma or degree or a grade, but against your peers. And I love that these people come back year after year and really want to improve. So there's that craft aspect, but also the content aspect. So just getting into them means that, you know, your peers or the people who are in charge say this is a worthy project. That's really good to boost your morale beyond just liking and disliking. So what does a gallerist want? Gallerists do not care if you have a degree or a diploma. Doesn't matter to them. Often people will think that that's what's standing between them and the getting an entrance. Really, it's not the case. I've never had a gallerist care about whether I had a degree or not, or even if whether I'm a professor. All they want to know is, can I sell it? That's it. And I've had the gallerists tell me, can I sell it? That's it. I've got a certain kind of clientele. Does this fit in or not fit in? So if you're looking for work, I used to do a lot of publishing, And first thing I learned, I would say I was quite successful as a commercial artist, and I did this little trick. I took a photograph of each piece that I made right after I made it. So whenever I'd be in a group show, lo and behold, my painting would be on the cover of the catalog or on the website or whatever. Because when they asked, well, who's got images? I got images. And not only do I have an image, I've got a paragraph written about the article, about the painting. And so as an editor, I knew that we're lazy as editors, as writers. We'll just, whatever's ready, we'll put up there. So taking good quality photographs of your work all the time, having them titled, ready to go is very important. So the commercial realm, they're saying, you know, can I sell it? And also, is this artist going to have legs, right? Are they, if I invest in this artist, and I'm not just selling peanut butter here, I'm investing in a career, how do I know they're going to keep going? Well, there's certain signs, certain kind of consistency of the work, being able to articulate a vision. So no works of art on the first rung ever receive, oh, I already said that. Oh, I'm going to say it again because this has got a funny line to it. So no works of art in the first rung, the amateur level, ever received critical art writing attention, ever. This is because they're not contributing anything new to the art discourse. Doesn't mean you're not making beautiful work. It's that discourse. So you mentioned about Monet. Monet's haystacks were about saying, you know what, all you guys are painting religious paintings and about the nobility. I'm going to paint this mere real thing, and I'm going to look at how the light changes over the whole day or a season. And that was a major breakthrough. It was groundbreaking. So the writers all wrote about it because he was actually doing something new. If I started going painting haystacks now, nobody would care because everybody knows what the story is. So why is this writing really important? It's the old tree falling in a forest thing. You know, if it falls and no one's there to write about it, did it really fall? I mentioned Zach Logan because here's a guy living, well, he's now living in big old Regina, which has no place in the art world, right? Nobody knows where. Whenever I'm touring around the country, I have to say, I'm from Regina. Where's that? Saskatchewan, never heard of it. Canada, oh yeah, next North America. Oh, okay. But how is it this artist makes it so big? It's because he attracts writers and curators who will write and curate his work and put them in this other currency. Now, there are other examples of people who do not write about their work well, and they do not do all the things you're supposed to do. Outsider artists. And how is it that they can get famous? And it doesn't happen too often, but some of them do. Again, it's the curators, it's the writers, it's a big network. It's all you have to do is think, how does a country and western star make it big? There's a producer, there's a record company. Art world is exactly the same. Now you can make music on your own, but you cannot break into those other tiers without those helps. Oh, there's just so much here. I'm going to leave it, I think, there, or you're going to be too bored. Let's see if there's anything really profound. No, I'm going to leave it there. So certainly room for questions if you have them.
Okay, you can either use the chat or you can wave your hand. I'm going to change to the gallery view so that I can see everybody. Okay, we have everybody who's off camera. I'm presuming there are no questions there from them. I do have some comments on it. I'd like to say thank you very much for this. I've learned so much. Some of the things that I valued, you have expanded on, and some of the things I thought, in particular for my own art practice, were not important because I didn't need them for my own, I guess, self-actualization. I think you've placed into context in terms of the greater meaning of how it all ties together. For example, there are artists who really never want to apply for a grant. Can you do it without getting a grant? I mean, if you don't really want to go that way.
Can you do what?
can you become a successful artist
I think
without
you used a phrase like,
that? I mean,
yeah,
sorry?
you used the phrase self-actualization, right?
Yes.
You know what, for most of us, that's pretty much the key. And I love Mike when he was talking about basically it's an addiction. What do I got to do to keep this thing going? I was writing about a friend, one of my colleagues, John Nosate, and I wrote in a little a catalog essay, and I said, you know what, when I look at this guy's work, I think that it's just an excuse for him to be alone. He's an introverted guy, and he just said, yeah, I'm going in the studio, you know? And when I told him about it, he said, it's so true. You know, there's some of us where this allows us our space to be ourselves, you know? So there's so many reasons, there's so many ways, and what counts, you know, as Mike was saying, approval of somebody that you care about or whose opinion you care for. That's huge. That's huge. For me, making money off my work wasn't important enough to make it a business. I just didn't want that burden. I found it really hard. I do fine, but that wasn't the priority. As a Métis person, I want to get certain stories out there. I want to have my stuff in the museums so that people have to deal with them. So it's part of the narrative. So that's a very specific goal. And so I make them in a very specific way. So those ones I make really large. So they'll pay me handsomely, but they'll go in there and they can't just tuck them away somewhere. And then they get used. Curators use them all the time. The great thing about that from a financial point of view is if you make work that is, say, political or challenging, you get artist rights. So every time it's on the cover of a book, or I got $5,000 once because someone used some of the paintings in a film. So there's certain kind of rights that keep going more than the value of the individual object. So there's other ways of making a living, speaking engagements, juries. There's certain things that go with that next level up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But
how do you see social media as integrating into an artist's career path?
Yeah. So well, I've had a lot of success that way. So right now I put up a painting, these still life paintings of books and rocks that all have political agendas to them every Monday and Friday. And I get great feedback, good comments, but then I got an exhibition deal and a book deal as a result of that. A few years back, I was doing a large painting and I put it up for the first time as it was being progressed because it was so frustrating to me. It was taking hundreds of hours more than it should have. And the Sask Arts Board saw it. And when it was finished, they said, we want it. So I think there's a really good way, but also to my further agenda, it's not just about the painting, it's about the content. So I want people to be influenced by the content. So social media is fabulous that way.
Just for exposure.
Yeah, for exposure. But again, you need to, if you want to go to that next level, you have to engage a curator and writers. And if that helps, then that's great. But the thing is, if you sell all the stuff, or you're not showing in the public art galleries or the higher levels, the social media is not going to get you there. Mm-hmm. But curators look at social media.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I keep tabs on all my fave artists and I look at who they look at. So when I'm curating a show, I've got a bank of people that I will talk about, So in Montreal, I was doing an awful lot of First Nations and Métis beading. And so I was going to those, like Ruth Cuthand or whatever sites. Oh, she likes this person. I'm going to look at their site and connection. So yes, that's for curators, and that it's really important.
Mm-hmm. I see a lot of artists developing their careers, and also queuing themselves up with exposing themselves to other artists around the world to a larger extent than was ever before possible through mediums like Insta and LinkedIn and just the social networks.
Absolutely. And so there are all these really weird, I don't know if they're actually art worlds, there sort of are. Like there's definitely an international indigenous art world. Absolutely. And there's one that's very commercial level of connections, other that's this sort of public art world. Yeah, that didn't really exist before.
Mhm. Okay, I'm not sure whether it said I'm not seeing. I've got the chat box open and I don't see anybody writing in it. So, and I don't see any hands waving. So are there any more questions that we have of any of the jurors? We can open it to either one of them.
Oh,
Whoops.
I'd like to say, can I ask David a question?
Sure.
So, I thought it'd be interesting. It's amazing how much of what you say I agree with, right? Like you're right about, you know, just about, I would say just about everything, but just to keep it interesting, right? The people who buy art, this has been my experience. I mean, you know, we all have different experiences, right? The people who buy art come from all walks of life. I've had very poor people spend, you know, whatever they had to buy a piece of my work. And I'm also collected by some of the wealthiest people in the world. And in some cases, the only way I found out was years later. And it's just, it's an odd business, right? But there's one family, this woman had bought 300 of my paintings over a period of 15 years, and I didn't know it, right? And then one day I find out, you know, I can't remember how I found out, but I found out one of the galleries finally told me that she was buying my work. And this is one of the things that happened in the gallery business, which is the way I've always sold my work. But anyways, most of them don't want to tell you who's buying your work because you're going to go undercut them or whatever, right? They want to make the money. They don't want to lose you as an artist. They don't want you to go off and sell somewhere else, whatever.
Yeah.
But anyway, and I remember they said, this person's from Texas. Anyway, they said, they're coming up for your show, right? And they want to meet you, right? And I said, who? And they said this, I'm not going to say their name because I don't think it's a good idea. But anyway, they said, they're coming up to your show and they want to meet you. And I said, who? And they said, well, they've got a whole bunch of your work. And I said, how much of my work? And anyway, so I found out this person's coming up to the show. I'm doing the show in Banff anyway. And they come up to the show and it's this wonderful little woman who comes up and she's I'm trying to think of what am I going to say to her, right? What am I going to say to her? Because what does she think of me? Because your work, and this is where you're right, David, I don't know what people think of my work, right? I just know they buy it and I'm happy with that. So when she's coming up to me, I'm thinking, what am I going to say to her? And so she comes up and you know, I said, well, you know, why did you buy all the work? And then, you know, anyway, so she gives me the story and you know, the experience to me was so gratifying, you know, that this person would want to come and meet me and would fly up from Texas to come to the show and all that kind of stuff. Had no reason to, right? And so I said, what do you like about my work? And she said, well, I can see something in your work. I said, well, what do you see in my work? She says, I can't tell you. I said, I need to know. I really need to know. It would be very helpful. But like you say, having a curator, right, or somebody there who could ask the right questions, but I didn't know what questions to ask this person. But they obviously, you know, they'd followed me for years and years and years. And we developed a good bond, but, you know, I really don't have any sense of why they bought my work, even to this day, just that they did, and that they collect art and they collect a lot of art and they've got the money to do it. So all that doesn't mean anything. And then there's one other place I want to go with this. is with what you were talking about. And I don't know if this is amusing to people, but it's amusing to me. I was doing a project in California once with another person in Lake Tahoe, California. And the woman who had hired us worked for the state, and this was a project, for the city of Lake Tahoe. Anyway, she says, "Do you want to come to this talk?" And I said, "What kind of talk?" And she says, "Well, we've got the woman coming in. She curates the University of California art endowment." And I said, "Well, what's that?" And I said, and she says, "Well, it's going to be one of those talks." I said, "What do you mean one of those talks?" I said, "I know what those talks are." And she says, "Well, you got to come." And I said, "Oh, I don't know if I'm going to come. I got a lot of things I got to do, right? I've been to so many of these things, right?" Anyway, she says, "You got to come." So Alan and I go to this talk. It's in a 1,500 seat auditorium, and there's like 20 or 30 of us in there. And she gets up on the stage and she's showing slides. She starts with a slideshow of, this is all the stuff bought by this huge endowment. They've got billions of dollars to spend on art. And the first slide comes up and it's like a water fountain. The second one comes up and it's culverts in the desert. And she gives the story of all the, the background. And the thing she always mentioned was how much everybody loved it or hated it and how much it cost. Those were the two things that were really important. When everything was in the millions of dollars, everything. There was nothing, Anyway, so the deal was we would come to the talk, Alan and I, the other guy I was with, and then we would go out for dinner together. So I thought, okay, I'm going to meet this woman. She has all this money. She gives out $40 to $50 million a year and she buys $40 to $50 million worth of art a year. What am I going to say to her? How do I, ingratiate myself to this woman, right? So we go out for dinner, and she's sitting across the table from me, and I'm talking. What am I going to say? So I reach over and I grab her by the hand, right, and I say, "I love you, and I'll do anything," right? And I just thought to me it was funny anyway, because you're at a loss for words. Right. And anyway, I ended up doing another project and she was involved, not on that scale, but anyway, it was a lot of fun. But we all look at things differently, but it all does, come down to what you're talking about, about the curators and the different levels. And the thing that you said that's really important and that I got from what you said, and I hope everybody else got it, because this is really important, is that you said, there's a way it works. There's the way the business works. And you're trying to describe, the different levels, the galleries, this level, that level. And you use words that, I might not use. I might talk about those things differently, but you're absolutely right. There are rules, there are guidelines as to how you play that game. And they're right in front of you. They're like bold-faced right in front of you. And you can either decide to play or not. But if you want to play in that pig pen or palace or whatever you want to call it, right, you have to play by their rules. You don't get to set the rules, and the odd person gets in sideways, but usually, you're playing their rules. And that's really, really good advice. And
and the thing is, you have to figure out what those rules are. And
you have to figure it out, yeah.
As soon as you get to the top end, it's so crazy. Like, you can go to New York, you can go to fancy commercial gallery, no prices.
Yeah.
And the prices for you are different than they are for somebody else.
Oh yeah.
It's the complexity. There's all sorts of good books and economics on this, but it's a incredibly corrupt game at the top.
Yeah. It's what I always tell people is, as strange a business as you think it is, you have no idea how strange it really is. The art business. It's just so bizarre and so many, but that makes it fun, right? Like, I know a lot of artists, they want to complain, like, I do what I do and I'm happy doing what I do, but I know lots of artists and they want to complain because this is the way this works and this is the way that works and why did the government do this? And and I say, you got to look at it all as, for what it is. it is what it is. And if you don't want to be part of it, right, don't complain about it. Just do what you want to do as an artist, right? And let them do what they're doing. They're having fun, right? So let them have their fun and you do what you want to do. The nice thing about the art world, and I don't know if this has always been this way, like I started out about the same time as you. And my reading of it is it's huge. Like it's a huge thing. And then at the same time, it's a very small thing. It's both of those things, right? Like it's small in the sense that there are rules about how it's played and what you have to do and those kind of things, right? But it's a huge thing in the sense that you like you say, it's a license to get in anywhere. Like you know, once you become an artist, it's like when I remember the first time I was driving over the border and I told the guy I was an artist. Whenever you go somewhere, everybody, oh, my mother's an artist, my aunt's an artist, my cousin's an artist, you know, everybody's a painter, right? Or an artist, right? But the first time I went over the border and I decided, okay, I can call myself an artist now. And they said, what do you do? I'm an artist. I thought for sure I'm getting pulled over, I'm getting in, they're going to put me in the room, make me, do whatever, right? But they said, oh, that's great. And come on in, right? And it does that everywhere in the world. Like you said, it's a license to.
I'll give you another example of a rule.
Yeah.
And there are lots of good ones.
Yeah.
Art prices never go down.
Yeah.
It's astonishing. No one's art prices, they only go up or they flatline.
Oh, I got a good one for you.
and if an artist, and so the reason why artists are kicked out of galleries is because people aren't buying the work, but they will never discount the price because that affects all the other prices what people had.
Yeah, that's true. That's huge.
So if you price yourself out of the market early on, or you go with the wave and you can kill careers. And then in 1989, a huge number of abstract artists just got wiped off the face of Canada because they were overpriced. Then when the market crashed, they were all kicked out of their galleries. So it wasn't that there was this shift from abstraction to something else. It was literally a commercial disaster. Yep. Anyways, there's certain other rules that are really worth learning. Framing, that was one of my paragraphs I had coming up. Framing's huge.
Yeah, framing's huge. Yeah, I tell people that too. Yeah, framing's. Yeah.
I think there are some other questions in chat. I saw a minute ago.
Yes. We have a question here. First of all, we have a thank you from Mohan Tenuara to David and Mike for making it very informative and bringing insights from different perspectives, which has made it very lively. So thank you very much, both of you. Leslie Franklin would like to know if there are lists, a place where you go find lists of Canadian curators anywhere. Like, is there a curators directory?
Yeah, there are curators directory. Like the Indigenous Curatorial Collective has a listing for Indigenous artists. I forgot what it's called, Canadian Professional Curatorial or Curatorium, but there's online. There's so many good resources. I remember I wanted to have, I had a solo show I wanted to send out. And so I thought I'm going to do this like a business plan without much discernment. I just made 20 packages. I sent them all out to the art gallery, public art gallery list. And so, 2 months later, I had a show at Articule, Art Site, all the A's. So it's been more discerning. But part of it too is looking at curators who are curating your kinds of work. Okay. If you got someone doing those pipes in the desert and so on, and you're a landscape painter, yeah, they're both kind of landscape, but it's apples and oranges. Yeah. So you want to go with the top people in the field who will be empathetic towards your project.
And is that because, I'm thinking of a gallerist who may have a client list who's
on the commercial side.
Yeah,
on the commercial side, it's very obvious. So people will think they're really radical when no gallery wants their work. They're just going to the wrong galleries. So I have lots of, counterculture type students, but then I show, hey, look at this gallery in Montreal or this gallery in LA. You're doing really soft work compared to what's happening in this hardcore scene. So each artist, you have to know the scene that you want to enter into.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
Now, Manny Schultz has a question. This one is addressed to David. He's curious, how do you differentiate between meaningful work and intellectual pretension? I guess, is that a question on sincerity?
Oh, that's so good. So when I've been working with my students, particularly my grad students now, I divide work into two categories. And one is sincere and one is ironic. So ironic is when you might take on a topic that you don't really feel heartfelt about, or something where you take a position that you don't necessarily really believe. And sometimes you can pull that off with a lot of, it can be very clever work, right? I think I'm a clever guy that way. But when I'm being sincere, then what I actually feel and what's coming through the work is the same thing, right? And so you have to get that scale for yourself, but also other people will be able to measure that affect. But when you talk about intellectual pretension, if by that you mean pretense to knowledge that you don't have, then yeah, everyone can see through that. The worst case of that are grant applications. Oh my God. When you're speaking, writing, and using Bakhtin or making citations to French philosophers or something like that, you're in the wrong business. No matter how fancy or conceptual your work is, that's not a place for it. That kind of intellectual pretension doesn't work. So again, the main thing that we're looking for on the grant side is, or even when I'm analyzing work from an MFA student at the end of the term, does what you say match up with what you do? And if your work is blank, right, that you're just painting horses, don't start talking about equine culture or something that you don't know anything about, or aristocratic privilege in the 19th century, or it's a painting of a horse, that's all it is, enjoy it. You know, so it's when things don't match up.
Yeah.
But when you see someone's work that is very complex and you want to know more, it's so you can understand the breakthrough that they're making. That's significant. So like these still life paintings I've got, you'll see a book on a rock. Well, what's that got to do with it? But then you realize that, you know, you look at other works, you realize that the rock refers to Indigenous grandfathers, and the books refer to academics trying to appropriate their knowledge, and the elders want their knowledge to be communicated through a book, but only because the youth aren't picking it up, and so on. You know, you get into an interesting discourse. Then people who know that scene can read the painting and say, wow, you put into a picture this whole big essay. It's all there in that picture. That to me is very rewarding. Is that intellectual? Yes. Is it pretentious? I don't think so. So really it's when there's a mismatch. People can be emotionally pretentious, right? Make all kinds of claims for their work, and you know, in a romantic way. You look at it and say, yeah, it's still a picture of a horse.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments? We seem to have satisfied our queriers.
Okay.
And so I think perhaps this is a good place to close it off. I thank you for one of the most intellectually stimulating juror lectures in several years. It's been a joy and a privilege to have you both on board. And I look so much forward to seeing your decisions given in the context of this juror lecture when we announce it on October the 28th, which is the evening of the awards recognition night. And that's when the shortlist will continue the show online, of course, until December the 31st. For those of you who haven't seen the show, you can see the show at msaojce.com. And I'm hoping that you will all be interested in coming to the awards night where we present the awards of excellence that the jurors have selected. Thank you both very much for all the thoughtfulness you've put into not only this evening, but into the selection of the show, of the works, and helping to make this show, and helping our artists and those interested in art to grow and become better at what they want to do with art. So thank you very much.
Thanks for having us. It was a great process going through the jury, so many wonderful works. And I look forward to seeing you all at the awards night.
Wonderful.
Right.
Thank you so much.
I'm going with what David said.
Okay.
Yours.
It's really been such a pleasure.
Even though we've got differences, I just can't believe how agreement there was. And we actually had a lot of pleasure going through the selection. There were many things, especially seeing them third, fourth, fifth time, that really started growing on you, and you got into the mentality of what people are up to. It's just something thrilling about people who are committed to their craft. So thanks for the opportunity to let us see all these things.
And you've brought up one last question. This could go on forever, but how have you found the online experience jurying as opposed to the real life where you have to have it done in one or 2 days? You've had the leisure time to look at these images separately and together, to mull them over and have discussions. I
have to say I miss the seeing things and understanding the scale differently. And when I've done the juries before, though, nothing's more intimidating than being in a room with work and then someone's watching you watch. So I love the privacy of going through the slides at my own pace and coming back with my pajamas on or whatever. So I miss that interaction, and I'm looking forward to someday to meeting you, Mike, out in Vancouver, or you on the prairies, because there's some that sort of camaraderie that you don't get when you're just doing business. You're not going out for a meal or something. So I miss that part, I'll be honest.
Our volunteers have commented too. They really enjoy that day where they're called the elves, where they have to set those works in front of the jurors and then retire to the very far end of the gallery so they can't overhear anything. But then everybody gets together in convivial spirit for lunch, and it's a day that's very, very I guess it's fraught with decisions, so many decisions that it's just such a pleasure, that kind of experience. And it also is a growing one. But I have to say that organizing the show, it's a little easier when the timelines are less constricted.
Yeah.
We don't have to produce a catalog overnight.
No, it was nice having leisure time to come back times.
Yeah. So thank you both very much. We'll see you all in 2 weeks, I hope. Please check the website for the link, and the public is welcome. There's no admission charge, of course. We're online, and we hope to see you all there.
Okay.
I wish you all a good night.
See you there.
Thank you.
Okay. And good night.